Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. Today I'm going to cover the latest transfer news, including United's pursuit of Christian Pulisic, Casemiro, and Thomas Meunier. I'm also going to give you part one of the official so-called Thiago tapes, as it's been called, but another name for it, and pause because this is going to be very corny, could be 13 reasons why the Glazers need to sell Manchester United. Jadon Sancho, welcome to your tape. And let me know if you liked that. But today's video is sponsored by OneFootball. We've teamed up with OneFootball to help bring you the best in football news. If you're looking to keep up with everything going on these days, and it is a lot, including the latest on the potential sale of Manchester United, download OneFootball today for free. Their easy-to-use app is clean and attractive. You can see the latest transfers, top news, curated for you, match scores live, streaming without subscription, and so much more, all built and personalized for your interests. Click the link in the description below today to download the OneFootball app and get all your football news, aside from the Muppetiers, of course, all in one place. All right, so before I get into all of the news regarding the sale, I posted a video yesterday in a private area, and I have recorded a private video with details that I understand of what is actually happening behind the scenes on this, in beyond what is just there, or what I've been told specifically by a couple of sources that I cannot share and I cannot publish right now, beyond just this discussion about selling a minor stake, which I believe to be opening the door to something much, much bigger than that. It's no coincidence, the timing of all of this. I will publish this if and when I am given approval, as I believe there's a lot more to come. In the meantime, I was told on August 5th that spending would be somewhat curtailed and that they'd failed with Eric's targets, which led them back to the old scouting lists, hence the targets we're about to discuss and that you're seeing in the news today. Starting with Christian Pulisic, I've been told there's a willingness from both Chelsea and Manchester United, and from the player himself, to make a deal happen and make a move to Manchester United. He was, I guess, a United fan as a child. There's pictures of him with it and all of that. But as an American, I can see he probably wants to play, given that the World Cup is upcoming. Though there's basically zero chance he's not going to be in the starting side for the USA anyways. This seems like something that could go. The clubs have been discussing a loan today. Chelsea want a sale. There may be a middle ground with some sort of option, but he's a flexible player who can play across the front three. Has now some years in Premier League experience, but he's never really been in favor under Thomas Tuchel, and even with that, he had some pretty important contributions in the run for the Champions League. He's shown up in some decent moments, and has had definitely struggles at times, but in a short-term deal or a low-risk deal, I don't think it's a bad option, and one that is definitely being explored. They certainly had been exploring it before it came out, and so I think that the talks for him are probably a little further on than they seem. With Casemiro, United's interest is real. He was offered around by Florentino Perez, or put out in media, and then to United by representatives, and essentially I think that sprung United into talking about him. So far, the talks continue, and it has not been shut down yet, and is, quite frankly, at the moment, the only current solid midfield link. I don't think that the 80 million price is real. Madrid either want to sell or they don't. If they didn't want to sell, they probably won't be selling him. If they do want to sell, they're not going to be selling for 80 million for a player who is the wrong side of 30. They paid about that price for Tchouaméni and a lot less for Camavinga. And they do actually tend to be somewhat fair on these things when it comes to sales. Madrid don't generally have massive sales. I mean, they sold Ronaldo for 100, but it was like with an agreement, and he was, Ronaldo. And it was because he was asking to leave. And anyways, there's a whole bunch of different things there. But I don't believe that Casemiro would cost around 80. I think it'd probably be more in the range of 50, 55. And I don't know. It's tricky because, as we've said, it's not necessarily the smartest long-term deal, But I consider this more in the vein of Thiago. This isn't like Rabiot to me. This is more like buying Thiago. A world-class player who's fantastic in a position we desperately need. If he lasts 3 to 4 years, he lasts 3 to 4 years as a level of player that you could win the league with. And in that time, you can solve the right back, goalkeeper, other midfielder, striker, right wing situation. You can get those 5 other major areas addressed in those 3 to 4 years and then come back to it. For instance, when we purchased Matic, he was really good, a really good fit. What was the problem with Matic? Injuries. He was a bit younger, but he was also had a much worse injury record, and he had a really bad injury. And since then, his fitness was struggling. But you could see when Matic was on, he was still practically the ideal player. Casemiro has a very, very good injury record. He's one of those kind of Iron Men. Ironically, same as his midfield partner for Brazil, who is also at United. Casemiro Fred is the first choice midfield partnership for one of the teams that is a favorite at the World Cup. So when people say, this and that about Fred and things and how if all these terrible players, Casemiro, Fred, and say Eriksen, if Bruno doesn't kind of shape up, would be an extremely well-balanced midfield that would fit the partnership of a team that is probably one of the favorites for the World Cup. They've played the last 10 games they've started together have 9 clean sheets, Fred and Casemiro. And Fred has been an excellent contribution to the Brazilian team and the first choice in the midfield alongside him. So it's not a bad idea for familiarity, on-pitch chemistry, working together, and could bring a bit of balance. So I get it. There's probably better younger targets. There's other people. I would still stand behind saying there's other players that could have got. Why not go for Matheus Nunes in this case if you wanted to do something like this? But Casemiro is a solid, very, 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 very good player who's a ball winner, who's good in possession, who can really shield and help and defend the back line. And so it makes a lot of sense to me. Has a huge immediate improvement on the weakest part of the team. Can really hold things down. I think he's a type of player that going from La Liga to the Premier League is a positive transition. Usually La Liga players are better in the Premier League than they were in La Liga. So I think it's a very, very good potential purchase here for the team in the vein of Thiago. And it would likely give you time. There's risk obviously associated with it, and 80 million would be a lot. But it's a really good player, and it would give you time to fix everything else while you have a world-class player. That's the difference between him and Adrien Rabiot, is buying a player who's never been that good and hoping he can do it and not really a 6 and trying to fill him into that role, versus buying a player who fits in perfectly right now. So I think it's a good move. It hasn't been shut down yet. It's continuing on for now, and so we'll have to keep an eye on it, where it goes, where it moves forward. Just checking on something here real fast, and if anything else happens. Let's see. All right, good. So yeah, this continues on at the moment, and the talks continue there. It has not been shut down by anybody that I speak with yet. Thomas Meunier, this sort of sprang up today. Again, we're talking about how they moved to the old lists. Well, he was on the old list. He was an alternative to Wan-Bissaka. He was the main alternative to Wan-Bissaka back in 2019. I don't know anything else about it personally. Palace have been interested in Wan-Bissaka. We know this. We've talked about this before. United have not been so open to selling as they didn't have the funds for another one, but now they may do in terms of Meunier, and so I don't have any more details there, but it'd be about 10-12 million. They could let Wan-Bissaka even go on loan. But here's what it all sort of leads me to, because you say, well, now we're talking about these little bits of money and buying these 3 players when nothing was sort of happening before. All of this leads me to believe United are spending the Frenkie De Jong funds at most. Because if you think about it, there's no way they're buying Casemiro and Frenkie De Jong, right? Meunier is affordable. Pulisic is probably a loan. As a total, it might add up to around, even with potentially a goalkeeper, it might add up to the Frenkie De Jong thing. And it looks to me like you're taking Frenkie De Jong and saying, instead of that, we'll get Casemiro, Meunier, Pulisic, and maybe a goalkeeper with those 4 players. And you do solve a lot more problems with it for now. It's not the worst move, but we'll see how it plays out. So, like I said, I was told earlier in August that the spending had been curtailed, but this is what I was told by one source in August. Early in August, around August 5th. That United knew Frenkie De Jong was not going to come, or was extremely unlikely to come at this point in time, and the spending had been cut, and the budget that they could spend now was essentially the Frenkie De Jong money at most. And that's what it looks like to me. And I've hinted over summer my concerns with the club maintaining confidence until very recently, finally it starts coming out that it seems incredibly unlikely that it's going to happen in the last week or two. But they've been saying they've had assurances all summer, right? And then in the last week or two, finally it starts coming out right as they're talking about signing other players. So this leads me to put out, and I was waiting till the end of the Frenkie De Jong saga, and even though they continue to maintain it could happen, it doesn't matter. At this point, it's worth putting this out there to reveal kind of the operating way that United do things in the media. And this is what I consider to be an extreme deception by the Manchester United board and hierarchy, the likes of which that to me are completely unforgivable and the types of things that should not allow them to continue to own and run Manchester United. What they did with Sancho in 2020, and likely what they did this summer with Frenkie De Jong. So here goes the story of Sancho 2020 and how United deceived the fans and the media on Jadon Sancho. Let's go back to how things started with Jadon Sancho. First, you talk about in July, there was a lot of talks, there was a lot of discussions, willingness of the player to come. Would he not come based on Champions League? And then it was determined that he would probably anyway, but they got Champions League on the final day, and the talks began. And you saw in the media leading up to a key date of August 4th, that was supposedly a major date that Manchester United entered advanced discussions for Jadon Sancho. At this time, the price that Dortmund named, United never put an offer forward to match it, though they were in talks, and the deal didn't happen. It went to advanced discussions, and then it slowed down, and essentially nothing happened. Through the rest of summer, you got a bunch of stories through middle August, late August, early September. There were supposedly in early September breakthroughs on the deal, that the deal was advancing. In late September, you got the famous, or middle September, you got the famous Sancho then tweet from Howard Nurse. You got more talks, you got more optimism of a deal still being done by the end of the window. You got a lot of things stating they still felt the deal would happen by the end of the window and that they were still working on it, which sounds very familiar to what we've seen on Frenkie De Jong. Now, what I was given, and this information, I will tell you, is indisputable. It is a fact. It is complete and total truth. Okay? Here's the reality of what happened behind the scenes. And they cannot claim innocence on this. They cannot claim they didn't know. They cannot claim anything else. Around August 9th, trying to word this right because there's some things that I cannot say, okay, that I'm just trying to do right. So if I'm pausing a little bit here, it's not necessarily to be dramatic, but because I want to get this exactly right. Around August 9th, the hierarchy at Manchester United understood that a deal for Jadon Sancho was extremely unlikely. And this was around, I believe, the time that Sancho was going to board the plane for preseason. There were some things out in the media that let everybody know of this. It was acknowledged by Ed Woodward, Matt Judge, and Joel Glazer, who is involved in every single step of this process entirely, that as of August 9th, Dortmund had pretty much made it clear that Jadon Sancho would not be sold this summer and that they would not entertain any offers. Not 120 million or nothing, that they would not entertain any offers. They knew it. On August 21st, they received a communication of some sort from Zorc at Dortmund that's basically indicated there was no way they could get a deal done, but they would be open to having discussions in the next window. During and after this time, Manchester United, Joel Glazer, Ed Woodward, Matt Judge, continued to push in the press that there was still a deal potential, that they were still optimistic of it, they were still working on it. They briefed breakthroughs, they briefed bids, they briefed all of it. During this time, they knew from communication with Dortmund that there was absolutely no chance of a deal occurring. They'd been told that, and yet they continued to say that it was, even to people within the club. There was many reports that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was assured he would be brought in and believed he'd be brought in, while they knew the entire time that there was no deal on the table. And it gets worse than that, because during this time, Manchester United came up with, between Ed Woodward and the departments of communications and other parts of Manchester United, a plan of some sorts to organize how they would manage this in the press. And this is the Manchester United playbook for failed deals that is entirely deceptive to fans, media, and everybody who's interested. They basically operate off of two strategies entirely. One is, when a deal is off, they will only leak or say or they will only brief this pull-out brief under two circumstances. Number one, if it comes out from somewhere else that the deal is off very reliably, that the deal is totally off, that there's no discussions. And that is unlikely to occur in many cases because it doesn't suit the other parties who are looking at it, agents or anyone, to say that there's no chance of a deal on the selling side. So they will only, this is specifically laid out by Ed Woodward and others, two people within the club, that is their media strategy. When a deal is dead, like Jadon Sancho was in 2020, and this is specifically with regards to how with Jadon Sancho, they said, we will not brief that the deal is off unless somebody else says that the deal is completely off and there's no chance and it is totally dead, which was unlikely to happen, in which case they had an entire message planned for how to do this that they put out right away to try to get ahead of it and claim that that's exactly when it fell through, when it wasn't. The other possibility for briefing that the deal is off is they only start to brief it at the same time as they have other targets lined up. They'll say then that we have decided not to do this deal, or that it's looking unlikely and we've moved our attention to other targets, only when they feel they've already got another one lined up to prevent the backlash from fans. So the entire crux of it, what they did with Jadon Sancho in 2020, is that they knew without a doubt that the deal was not going to happen as early as August 21st, and they falsely briefed through summer that the deal would happen, or that they were optimistic of it when they knew they weren't, with an overall plan that they would not tell anyone that it was off unless it came from somewhere else, or they had alternatives lined up so that they could prevent pressure from fans. This is the Manchester United playbook for briefing and media. And it all comes from the top because it is not being run by a director of football in a football recruitment department. It has all been organized by Joel Glazer, who's in direct communication with the people in charge. This information I have is I don't have this level of information for this summer, but I know that they don't change. And in 2020, Joel Glazer was involved in every single decision that was made, in constant communication over the Jadon Sancho deal, over the targets, over how they would shift, over how they would adjust, over how the fees would be used, over what money would be spent, over which players were approved to buy or not. He was involved in all of it. He was involved in a decision not to let this out there that the Sancho deal wasn't happening. So, given that this is part one of the whole thing, this is the first circumstance of Jadon Sancho. To put it in summary, Manchester United knew that a deal was impossible from a Dortmund perspective in early to mid-August and continued to brief things that were essentially not true, including indications of optimism that a deal will get done, and all of that when they all acknowledged that it was extremely unlikely to happen, and it wasn't just a negotiation position, and that they were never willing to offer the type of money that would have even been required in the first place. So, in addition to that, they set out a specifically deceptive briefing strategy to not say that they'd ended their pursuit until it came from somewhere else or they had an alternative lined up to prevent backlash. Now, one could say that that's their prerogative to do that, but it's also false, and it gives a completely wrong picture of what's happening, and is very extremely misleading to fans. And personally, my opinion is that their entire picture they present of how recruitment goes is false and isn't true and has never been the case, because Joel Glazer is involved in and makes every single decision about it. So that's part one of this. I'll keep you updated. I'll make another video tomorrow. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to tell me what you think in the comments below.